In today's episode of Locked On Pistons podcast, we're reviewing Ausar Thompson's season and discussing why he proved to be the Pistons' second most important player. We'll talk about that. Today's episode, Locked On Pistons podcast. Let's go.
You are Locked On Pistons, your daily Detroit Pistons podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What's the deal? Welcome back to another episode of the Locked On Pistons podcast. Per usual, I'm your host, Ku Khahil. You can find me over on Twitter at Ku Khahil. I want to thank you guys for making Locked On Pistons your first listen of every single day. We are free and available on all your podcast platforms. And if you haven't already, head to the YouTube channel at Locked On Pistons. Hit that subscribe button or leave us a 5-star review on whatever podcast platform you're listening to this on. That's another great way to support the podcast. And today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. Right now, new customers can get $200 in bonus bets when your first $5 bet wins. Check out the description down below for the playback and the Substack, while I have Jaden Ivey season review written out, film breakdown, all of that coming out either tonight or tomorrow morning. So stay tuned for that. That's coming to you guys really soon. But let's go ahead and get into today's episode. We'll review Ausar Thompson's season, the positives, the negatives, and my overall takeaways from his second season in the NBA. So let's go ahead and get into it. We're going to start with the positives. And something you're going to realize as we go through the positives are Ausar, when you're evaluating Ausar's season, I'm going to spend a little bit of time, but not too much time will be spent on his individual stats. Because he's not going to be someone who scores 20 points a game, at least right now. I don't think that's really ever probably going to be who he is. But his raw box score numbers are probably never going to jump off the page as, oh my God, he just averaged 19, 10, 5. Like, that's not what he's going to be. However, you are going to feel his impact on the team every time he's on the floor, and that's where you really see how great of a player or how good of a player he was this past year for the Detroit Pistons. So I want to start with this. In order to set this up to showcase how good he was this year and how large of an impact he had on the Pistons this year, you have to rewind a little bit and see what they were without him. So I want to start in December, because December, I've realized over recently, to be honest, I've seen a lot of people believe that December is when the Pistons really started to turn the game around, their season around, and it wasn't really so much just Ausar coming back that turned their season around. It was they were starting to turn around December. They were already starting to play well. And that's just unequivocally false. If you go to December, the Pistons had a record of 5-5 in the month of December. Their net rating in the month of December was minus 5.6 in the month of December. Their defensive rating, they had the third worst defense in basketball in the month of December. Again, they had the third worst defense in the month of December. And if you guys were listening to the podcast when this the December happened, you guys will remember. I came on the podcast, I believe the podcast was named, like, is this a fluky December? Because the Pistons did win 5 games in the month of December, but their net rating was horrible and their defense was just getting worse and worse. So I came on the podcast and said, is this really sustainable? Are they actually getting better, or are they just winning some high-scoring, lucky games at the end here, and this isn't really sustainable? We talked about that on the podcast. That was the narrative around the team at that point. That was in December when Ausar was on like that 15-minute, I believe he came halfway through and then 15-minute restriction during that time. Then you entered January. Obviously, everyone's heard this that many of times. But this is how much the Pistons flipped. I had to paint the picture. In January, when Ausar was put into the starting lineup until the end of the year, the Pistons jumped from the third worst defense in basketball during the month of December. They jumped to the 8th best defense in basketball for the rest of the year after Ausar was put into the starting lineup. Their net rating after Ausar Thompson was put into the starting lineup went from, 18th in the NBA, around, just slightly below average, minus 6 point, what was it, minus 6.4? I just had the number. Where is it? Let me go back and look. Minus 5.6 in the month of December. It jumps to 6th in the NBA at plus 5.2 for the rest of the year after Ausar Thompson was put into the starting lineup. Ausar Thompson being put into the starting lineup and being able to play more minutes is what turned the Pistons season around. It unlocked their defense. It unlocked Jalen Duren defensively, or covered some of his weaknesses defensively. They played faster. They forced more turnovers. They were able to become one of the best transition fast break teams in the entire NBA solely because Ausar Thompson was put into the starting lineup and he warped their defense. That is what happened. And that shows how impactful he is already as a second-year player in the NBA. I do want to go through his numbers from January 4th until, if Basketball Reference will not freeze on me here. Basketball Reference, by the way, gotta upgrade your site. Don't know what's going on here. Every time I use this site on my PC, I'm recording, it freezes nonstop. It's terrible. Anyways, during those games, those 45 games from January 4th to the end of the year, Ausar Thompson put up averages of 11 points a game, 5.4 rebounds a game, 2.5 assists, 1.8 steals a game, with 0.9 blocks a game, shooting 55% from the field and 68.3% from the free throw line, which is much higher than it was at the beginning of the year when he first came back. He slowly started to become better and better and better at the free throw line as the season went on. I believe if you even go over his last, like 15 games, it gets even higher, his free throw percentage. But yeah, you go over his last 20 games, he shot 73% from the free throw line. So he started to become a better and better and better free throw shooter as the season went on. So that was his averages after he was put into the starting lineup. Now I want to go into what the team looked like when he was on the floor and when he was off the floor. This is including when he comes back. This is including after January 4th and moving on, just when he subbed off the floor. When Ausar Thompson was off the floor for the Detroit Pistons this year, they had a net rating of plus 1.03. So actually they were a positive team even with him off the floor, which is pretty good, to be honest. The Pistons really turned it around there. But when he was on the floor, their offense jumped from 115.5 offensive rating to 116.1. Their defensive rating jumped from 114.5 defensive rating to 112.2 defensive rating. Their offense and defense both got better every single time Ausar Thompson came onto the floor, and they had a net rating of plus 3.82 with Ausar Thompson on the floor. There is no other player on the Detroit Pistons outside of Tobias Harris whose on-off was so crazy because his backup four was so bad, and Simone Fontecchio. There is no other player on the Detroit Pistons that has had, I mean, obviously, we're not going to include Cade because Cade's the face of the franchise, but there's no other Piston on the roster that has had this big of an impact, this big of a change in how the Pistons performed this year and was as big of a catalyst to the Pistons achieving what they achieved this year other than Ausar Thompson. His impact was felt drastically this year. Now I want to kind of go to, my goodness, man, can these places stop? Can everything just stop freezing on me every single time I go to it? Like, my goodness. Anyways, finally loaded. I want to look at what he shot at the rim after January 4th as well, once he started to get in better shape and once he was put in the starting lineup, etc. He shot 67% at the rim, which is better than last year. He was in the 52nd percent, and this is all according to Clean the Glass. He was in the 52nd percentile at the rim. A lot of those were dunks. He dunks almost everything around the rim. You see him dunk the ball. Last year, he was in the 50th percentile around the rim. This year, he was in the 62nd percentile. So he jumped 12 percentages this year, percentiles, I should say, this year in the NBA. Now, we will get into some of his negatives later, and that will come up with some of his layups around the rim. But he became a much better finisher this year for the Detroit Pistons throughout the year, and especially as the season went on, as he started getting in better shape, obviously as the year went on. The other point I want to bring up is this. Is that this is Ausar Thompson. This was Ausar Thompson coming off blood clots, not having an off season at all, missing the beginning of the season, and having to come in halfway with no practice, no off season, no training camp, having no stamina, having to work his stamina up and his game shape up as the season was going on. And he was able to impact the team as he did, as we just pointed out. Imagine him with an off-season, an actual training camp when he's actually at peak stamina. You guys remember, those of you guys who watched Ausar Thompson his rookie year. Ausar, his rookie year, had non-stop motor, 99 stamina, was never tired. That was not the case this past year. And for good reason, we understand why. But just imagine if he gets back, once he gets back to that 99 stamina, full out motor, never really getting tired. Imagine what happens then. Imagine when he has an offseason to actually develop and get training, have a training camp. Who knows what the ceiling is going to be for this guy? Obviously, it's hard to paint. Defense is hard to quantify with numbers. Obviously, we talked about his steals. He's almost averaging 3 steals a game. Like that tells you pretty good. That's a pretty good indicator. Obviously, how good the defense was with him on versus off the floor, that tells you a pretty good indicator. The defense jumping 20 spots in the league from when he came back into the starting lineup versus when he wasn't playing. That gives you a good indicator of how good he is defensively. But there aren't really any perfect numbers for defense to illustrate how good he is. But if you watch the games, along with those numbers that we can bring, you know that he was one of the best defenders in the NBA this year on a per-minute basis. And when he's able to play 30-plus minutes, I think he's going to be an all-defensive member for the rest of his career, at least the rest of his prime. That's how good he is defensively. We're not going to talk about his playoff season because we already went through his playoff season in a previous review. This isn't the playoff review. This is the season review. So overall, I think you walk away from Ausar Thompson's second season in the NBA saying he got better, he showed just how impactful he is, he showed just how important he is to this team's success, and I believe that he showcased that he is the second most important player on this basketball team when it comes to winning basketball games and impacting this team. I think he's the second most important player on this team. There are a few other things that he improved on. His handle got slightly better this year. He was trying a lot more things with the ball in his hands. A lot of crazy behind-the-back crossover moves. It's still a little too loose. It still needs to get much better, but it did get better from last year to this year going into the second season. But yeah, I thought this was an ultra success of a second season for Ausar Thompson. I can't wait to see what his third season brings for him. So let me know. Comment section down below or over on Twitter at Ku Khahil. What did you guys feel about Ausar Thompson's second season? What were the positives? Were there any positives that I did not bring up that you guys feel like I should have brought up? Let me know. Comment section down below or over on Twitter at Ku Khahil. When we come back, we'll get into some of his negatives and some of his weaknesses that he has to improve upon. And trust me, there are some weaknesses that he has to get better at. We'll break them down coming up. Today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. The NBA playoffs are in full swing, and every night the NBA Finals are here. Almost every other night, delivers highlight-worthy performances, major momentum shifts, and can't-miss moments. Whether it's a game-winning shot or a breakout player, there's never been a better time to get in on the action. FanDuel makes it easy to stay in the game before tip-off and live. With player props, performance trends, and same-game parlays, fans have more ways than ever to play smart and win big. New to FanDuel, it's the perfect time to sign up. Head to FanDuel.com and place your first $5 bet, and if it wins, you'll get $200 in bonus bets. I've told you guys many of times when betting became legal in Michigan a few years ago, I didn't know where to go. I tried out FanDuel. I have not turned back since. Super fun to use, super self-explanatory, but obviously, most importantly, it's super fun to use. And if you're new to FanDuel, you can go to FanDuel.com right now and place your first $5 bet, and if it wins, you'll get $200 in bonus bets. Make every moment more with FanDuel, the official sports betting partner of the NBA. So I want to thank you guys again for making Locked On Pistons your first listen of every single day. We are free and available on all your podcast platforms. If you haven't already, head to the YouTube channel at Locked On Pistons, hit that subscribe button, or leave us a 5-star review on whatever podcast platform you're listening to this on. That's another great way to support the podcast. And make sure you guys are looking over at the Substack. If you're not subbed over there on the Substack, click the description down below. Subscribe over there. We got Jaden Ivey's season review coming to you guys. It's a very lengthy breakdown, full of film, stats. It's a real in-depth breakdown. I think you guys will really enjoy it. So if you guys aren't subbed over there and you guys haven't seen the Ausar Thompson, Jalen Duren, Kay Cunningham, along with all the film breakdowns we did after every single playoff game, go check it out. Sub over there. I think you guys will really enjoy it. We're close to 500 subs over there. I really would appreciate it. All right, so let's go ahead and get into Ausar Thompson's negatives from this past year. And look, I know that I am, and I'm proud to say this, I'm cool with being this guy in the community. I am the Ausar Thompson guy. I'm probably the highest on Ausar Thompson in the community. I think a lot of people are high on him now, but I'm going to maintain that I am the highest. Everyone remembers that I drafted him 5th overall a few years ago, obviously in the Locked On mock draft, and got laughed at by Locked On the mock draft. Got laughed at by them. And Ausar was not the popular pick at 5. People wanted Cam Whitmore, Jarris Walker. Like, he was not the popular pick. And the Pistons ended up going with who I wanted, and I believe they've been proven right by selecting him. So yes, I am very high on Ausar, but that does not mean I am blind to his weaknesses and don't understand where he has to get better at. So let's go ahead and get into it. The first area that I think is a little bit concerning. So if you remember coming into the draft, I was pretty, I don't want to say high. I would say I was higher than some of the other evaluators on his potential to improve as a three-point shooter. At the end of his OTE season, he was taking a lot of off-the-dribble threes, a lot of step-back threes, self-creation threes. I was really a believer that he could eventually become a three-point shooter. And in his rookie season, he was at least taking some threes, right? His rookie season, he took 1.8 threes a game. Now, he shot 18%, which was way lower than I thought he would. I thought he would come in at like 26%. Way lower than I thought. But at least he was taking 1.8 threes a game. You're like, okay, they're trying to develop it. Then there was this big deal made of Fred Vincent being brought in to develop him and Ron Holland's jumper. Now, I understand he dealt with blood clots and wasn't able to really practice all summer. I get it, okay? I understand. So maybe that changes things moving forward. But this year, it wasn't that he just wasn't making threes. The Pistons essentially said to him, we don't want you taking threes. We think it's a waste of possession for you. We think it's a waste of a possession for us. And really, it's not really giving you any value, to be honest, for you to shoot these threes and not shoot that well on them. We think you provide more value in the dunker spot, as a handler, in the screen and roll game, all that kind of stuff. We think you provide more value rather than us putting you in the corner and asking you to shoot threes. And when you do get the ball at the corner, we want you to drive the closeouts and trigger into DHOs, which is what started happening as the season went on. He didn't even take 1 3 a game this season, which is pretty concerning to me. Because now I went from pre-draft to being, okay, I think he can become a decent three-point shooter. I'm a believer in it. To now I'm at, after his second season, where I'm pretty, I believe pretty much he's probably never going to shoot threes. That's where I'm at right now. Maybe everything changes going to the next year. Maybe Fred Vincent works a miracle, and now all of a sudden he comes out next year shooting 2 threes a game, and he's shooting 35% on them. Maybe that happens. But the fact that the Pistons went from having him shoot threes to try to develop it to now telling him we just don't want you to take them at all does not give me much confidence that it's something that they really believe that he can eventually do. Because he wasn't even taking them. They didn't even want him taking open ones. So I think that's the biggest area of concern for Ausar, because when you drafted him, obviously we'll get into the other part, but when you drafted him, there was the part we'll eventually get into, and I'm sorry if you guys can hear someone mowing lawn behind me. They're doing maintenance in my apartment complex. Either way, three-point shooting. You had to believe in his three-point shooting coming around at some point, or coming around at all. And I believe that. And I'm not sure that's the case anymore. So that's a little bit concerning to me. That's probably my biggest concern from him this second season, is I don't know if that three-point shot will ever be a part of his game. The second problem, or the second weakness, I would say, with his second season, and it's hard for me to say these weaknesses because, again, he didn't have an offseason in training camp, so I wonder if these are things that will improve now that he actually does have one. Is not silent with blood clots, but nonetheless, we have to be fair and talk about what we saw this season. I know I said in the earlier segment that his handle did get a little better, and it did, but it didn't get it didn't get good enough to where JB Bickerstaff was trusting of him enough to allow him to be a secondary creator within the half court, which is the big reason why you draft him at 5. You draft him at 5 because he's an all-world defender. He's one of the best athletes in the entire NBA. Plus, he's a secondary creator with playmaking chops that can run some offense for you. That was the swing factor, and I really believed in that, and I still very much believe in it to a very high degree. We saw some games against Philly when he was able to play point guard. It looked really good. We see him. I just put out a whole compilation of him as a transition playmaker. We know how good of a passer he is. We know how good of a processor he is. But his handle has not gotten good enough, at least as of right now, to where JB Bickerstaff trusts him to be a consistent secondary creator within the half court, and that's why his assist numbers are still low to around 2.3 a game, because he just doesn't have a high usage. He's not being asked to create within the half court because they just don't trust him yet, which is a little, I won't say it's concerning to me. I think it will get better. I believe he's going to be able to do it, but that still was a weakness from this past year. This was something that people expected, like myself, expected him to be able to do this season, and he just wasn't tasked with doing it very often, which was a bit disappointing and something I hope he's able to improve upon enough to where they're asking him to do it next season, because that really is the swing factor to him becoming this great basketball player. The other area of his game that I think he must improve upon, his finishing did get better around the rim. It certainly did. However, he still is not as good of a finisher as you'd like him to be. Like, he's around, the 56th or 52nd percentile, like I said? 56, I believe it was. Shooting around, 67% at the rim. He was 62nd percentile at the rim. Shooting 67% at the rim. That is fine. That's good. But for some of with his wingspan, his athletic ability, he should be able to finish much higher than that. He should be a 70% plus finisher at the rim, especially when the majority of all of his shots are coming at the rim. And the problem is that when he's dunking the ball, I mean, he's finishing, but he hasn't been able to finish consistent enough to where you're a great finisher. I think he should be a great finisher. This isn't good enough to me. 62nd percentile, I want him in the 70 plus percentile. In order to get there, he has to become a better finisher on his layups, better finisher with his improve his touch around the rim. I think a lot of it has to do with what we talked about pre-draft still. I don't think his footwork around the rim is still very good. I think he still makes finishes a lot harder than they need to be. He could take one more step, one more dribble, and he's just at the rim and he's finishing either with an easy dunk or just an easier layup at the rim. I do also think he's oddly very comfortable with his left hand. Maybe sometimes a little over comfortable because he goes to his left hand and tries to take tougher finishes with his left hand too many times, I feel like, when he can just go with his right, his main hand, and just go with an easy finger roll layup. I think that's just something you can coach out of him, and maybe with some training, you can go over film and be like, hey, we know you like going to your left hand, but this right here, you probably didn't need to do that. I think that could improve, but nonetheless, his finishing around the rim needs to get even better if that's going to be the main source of his offense. If all of your shots are coming at the rim, you need to become very elite at those shots. And right now, according to Clean Glass, he's just good at them. He's not elite. He's just good. As an alley-oop finisher, he's great. As a dunker, he's great. But on layups, he's still not good enough to where he's able to really dominate the game like inside the paint, if you know what I'm saying. Outside of that, the only other thing from his season that I think he needs to improve upon, and I don't know if this is something he'll ever really improve on, because I feel like this is something that just comes with the kind of defender he is. And I think that as he gets further into his career, refs will give him a little bit more respect on the defensive end. But he does get into foul trouble at times because of how aggressive he plays defensively. And that does take him out of games, puts the Pistons in a tough position, like we saw in the playoffs. But even during the season, he did that at times, especially during times when he was struggling. Remember that stretch in the middle of March when he was really struggling and people were like, what's wrong with Ausar, blah, blah, blah. A lot of that was due to the fact that he was in foul trouble and wasn't able to play as aggressive and just wasn't playing as many minutes because of it. So he needs to get better at defending without fouling. However, I just think that's going to be a hard thing to kind of coach out of him. I think you kind of just have to hope that the refs give him more leniency like they give these great defenders, like we see in the finals with Lou Dort and Alex Caruso, where their reputation allows them to get away with a little bit more. I think that's something you just got to hope with Ausar. Although there are some fouls, yes, that he has like half court, 94 feet away from the basket, where you're just like, hey, it's not worth it there. Just get back. You don't need to pick up this foul. He needs to be a little bit smarter when he picks up the second foul, when he picks up the third foul, about what he wants to do then. That is an area where he has to improve upon. But that's all I've got right now with that. Let me know in the comment section down below. Are there any other weaknesses that I did not point out that you guys think of that you'd like to see him really improve upon? Let me know. Comment section down below or over on Twitter at Ku Khahil. Coming up, my final takeaways from Ausar Thompson's second season in the NBA. I'll give those coming up. So I want to thank you guys again for making Locked On Pistons your first listen of every single day. We are free and available on all your podcast platforms. If you haven't already, head to the YouTube channel at Locked On Pistons, hit that subscribe button, or leave us a 5-star review, whatever podcast platform you're listening to this on. That's a great way to support the podcast. Description down below for the SUBSTACK, Jay and Ivy season review coming up, and the Playback Room. We'll watch some of the finals games together. If you want to do that, head over there. Also, if you haven't already, make sure you guys are tuning into the last episode where we had Keith Smith, cap expert, CBA expert, head of Spot Track. Head over there, watch that episode, because Keith does a great job of really explaining where the Pistons are at heading into this offseason, cap-wise, the impact on the CBA, extension decisions, all of that stuff, so you have the best understanding possible of what the Pistons, what their position is right now when it comes to the CBA and the cap, and some of the decisions they have to make moving forward because of that. So go check that out if you haven't already. But my final takeaways from Ausar Thompson's second year, I kind of spoiled it in the first segment, but I very strongly believe, I believe all of the numbers back up. And even if you just watch the games, you watch the Pistons before January and you watch the Pistons after January, that Ausar Thompson is the second most impactful player on this basketball team. His defense, this is now 2 years in a row where Ausar Thompson himself warps the Pistons defense. That when he's on the floor, And when he's in the lineup, the Pistons' defense is one of the best in the league. And when he's off the floor, they crash to one of the worst. This is now 2 back-to-back years. His first 2 years in the NBA as a rookie and as a sophomore, he's having that kind of impact. I could never have guessed that kind of impact. That's otherworldly impact. And we talked about this in Jalen Duren's review of the playoffs. We talked about it in him and Ausar's playoff review over on the SUBSTACK. But there is a strong part of me that also believes that Ausar Thompson makes Jalen Duren work. Jalen Duren's only positive duo net rating in the playoffs was with Ausar. When he's not playing with Ausar during the regular season, the defense drops heavily, falls off the cliff. So part of me believes the only player on the team that makes Duren, I don't want to say makes Duren because it sounds disrespectful to Duren, but Ausar Thompson being on the floor with Duren, there's no other way I can really think of saying it other than makes Duren a passable defender and allows them to reap the benefits of Duren's offense because Ausar's covering everything defensively. Along with that, I think you saw offensively that despite his limitations, and this was something we talked about all playoffs, but it was even more evident during the regular season. Like I said, the offense got better when he was on the floor offensively. And why is that the case? It's because despite his weaknesses, despite the turnover here and there that makes you roll your eyes, despite his inability to shoot threes, despite the every now and then possession in the half court that gets a little clunky because they don't space it right because he can't shoot threes. Despite all of that, their offense is better with him on the floor because their best offense is being able to run and being able to force turnovers, being able to score in fast breaks, being able to score in transition, and his ability to take advantage of how defenses like to guard Cade, where they put 2 on ball, and his ability to attack 4-on-3 situations as a play finisher and as a decision maker out of the short roll or as a ball handler. That is why the Pistons offense is still better with him on the floor, despite the fact of the occasional eye roll at the layup, at a missed layup, at a turnover, at some of the spacing at times. That's why it's still better with him on the floor. So just imagine after an offseason when he gets to actually train, when he actually gets to develop, what he looks like. This is an incomplete player that already had this type of impact on the floor for the Detroit Pistons. And this is all without me even mentioning. It's kind of just like a given when you talk about Ausar. But you can't just gloss over it because it probably is the biggest reason why he's able to do all this. He's probably a top first percentile athlete in the NBA. Him and his brother are some of the best athletes we've ever seen in the NBA. With their size, with their wingspan, their speed from one end of the floor to the other, their quickness, their vertical, their explosiveness, their ability to double jump, their ability to get high as quick as they do. They're 2 of the best athletes we've ever seen. So you take a player like that and Ausar, you can't, I know that's a given, we already know that, but you kind of have to mention that when you bring up the fact that he's this all-world defender, that he has that kind of processing and playmaking ability and finishing ability. You combine that with the type of athlete he is, it's just a very unique basketball player. And I'm not sure we've seen many of these type of players of him and his brother because of all of that into one. Usually you get the athlete that's like that but doesn't have the greatest, processing, isn't the greatest passer. Usually you get the processor and the passer and the playmaker, and they don't really have a lot of athleticism to them. Like obviously, if someone goes in the comments and says LeBron, I'm going to spaz. Like, come on. If someone says LeBron James in response to that, like, can we be for real right now? You don't see many players like that. It's usually one or the other. It's very rare that you get this type of athlete that has that all-world defense and knows how to play the right way, high IQ, passing, playmaking processor. The only other guy I can think of that jumps off the top to me is Andre Iguodala, prime Iggy, and I was a little young during this guy's prime, so I don't know if he was that athletic. I know he had great size and a wingspan, but I know he had all the other stuff. If he was, I feel like I remember him being pretty athletic, but someone older than me can correct it. Also, Andre Karolinko. Like, those are the guys that come to my head. Those are the only ones I can think of that are like this. So, I'm very interested to see how Ausar Thompson looks going into a season where he actually gets to train and develop. But after his second season, he was a part of the Pistons breaking their playoff win drought. He played much better in the playoffs as the series went on. But this isn't a playoff series review, so let me go ahead and just stay away from that. The regular season, he was the single biggest reason why the Pistons turned their season around in January. He warped their defense. He got better as a player moving as the season went on. And I believe he's the second most impactful player, second most important player on this basketball team. That's my takeaways. That's my final takeaway from Ausar Thompson's second season in the NBA. Let me know. Comment section down below or over on Twitter at Ku Khahil. Do you guys agree, disagree? What are your thoughts? Again, comment section down below or over on Twitter at Ku Khahil. That's all I've got for you guys today. Thank you guys for making Locked On Pistons your first listen of every single day. Free and available on all your podcast platforms. If you haven't already, head to the YouTube channel at Locked On Pistons. Hit that subscribe button or leave us a 5-star review, whatever podcast platform you're listening to this on. And until next time, I will see you guys later. Stay safe out there. And until next time, peace out, everybody.